Hey, hello, Tanzila.
Hello.
Do you hear me?
Yeah, you can hear me?
Perfect. Yeah, hear you very well.
So how are you doing today?
Good, very good. How are you doing? What time is it right there?
It's 7:30 and then
7:30. Okay,
I've
it's
got
not that bad.
yeah.
I felt like, oh, I hope it's not too late over there. Okay,
Yeah,
good.
it's really fine. It's really fine. Thank you.
Okay, good.
So thank you for being part of the session and taking your time.
Yes, my pleasure. Let me know if there's any background sound. I think the microphone is like short range,
And,
but if you hear like, is it okay?
yeah, it's fine.
Okay, perfect.
You are clearly audible to me.
Okay, fantastic.
Okay. I'm really looking forward to the conversation. So let's start with your introduction. So
Okay. So yeah, my name is Alex Trochut. I studied graphic design in Barcelona. Graduated in 2001. So that's almost, yeah, it's more than 20 years ago. And I've been working in Barcelona till 2013 or 12, and then the last 10 years I've been in New York. And I've been working as a freelance for the last 15 years. And basically focusing a lot in the written medium, although I kind of like I'm not a specialist in any discipline, but probably making images that contain text. It's kind of like what become a little bit my sort of my speciality. But within that framework, there's so many techniques and tools that I use in order to convey the messages of my clients.
okay, it's more like illustration and typography, mix of both.
Yeah, you could say like that. Yeah, that's right.
So how do you come up with the idea like this is really your style is very innovative, you can say, and unique and very different?
Well, I don't think it was something that I came up with. I think it was kind of like the factors of many things happening in the creative environment that I was growing up into, because in the early 2000s, you could see how the graphic design specialty where digital tools have kind of like started to dominate, and we were started to get more and more control over these digital tools, and not only for setting up text and doing things that were more for just building something in a very graphic way. I think there was also a big pull for expressing yourself through illustration, and of course graphic design specialized in text, and typography is kind of like the DNA. You can branch out to different specialities like photography, illustration, and calligraphy, and all these other elements, but in the end, typography is kind of like the backbone of graphic design. So it was just a combination of factors that I think was ready at the time that I was starting to be a graphic designer, where illustration and typography was kind of like meeting together because the factors were there.
Okay, what was the year you were talking about this?
I think the early 2000s, around, like, for example, there were studios that I really admire, like Non-Format or Paris. And you maybe remember some of the covers from Paris for Bjork, or magazines designed with heavy use of typography. Non-Format, for example, did amazing work on Wire magazine, and also Tokyo magazine with Diane Chuck. So there was like few of my heroes at that time that were doing very interesting work. And I think, yeah, around like 2003, I started to kind of like work more on letters and illustration together.
So have you done any particular course in graphic designing?
Yes, I did my graduate course in graphic design in Elisava in Barcelona, and that was, yeah, like I finished in 2001.
Hmm. So, so what was the like designing trends at that time? And you can see there the trends have
Mhm.
changed, and you have innovated yourself different new style. So, what was the trend, and what intrigued you the most?
Hmm. Yeah, I think it's hard to answer. I think there's always many things happening at the same time. But I think at that time we were kind of like living the 90s. The 90s were very dominated by in graphic design trends. I think like many people, at least in my bubble, was really obsessed with everything that was very techno and very aesthetic, very driven by something that felt very modular, very mechanic, but at the same time very electronic. So a visual example would be the work of Designer Republic, which was this legendary studio in England that they were doing so many record covers. Designer Republic had like established a style that was very kind of like mechanical and cold, almost designed by aliens in a certain way, and it was very seductive. But then as we move into the 2000s, I felt like there was a little bit more of a wave of something still retaining a little bit that minimalism and something that it was very kind of like graphic, but adding an element of something more emotional and something a bit more romantic. So that's where studios like Paris, I think they're starting to introduce this sort of like more human element to the work. So things were softening up a little bit. So we went from very hard shapes to something that it was a little bit more fluid and rounded and softer. And it was kind of like a decade for me that it was all about very fluid shapes that were transitioning like a liquid from one thing to the other. And then in the last other decade, I feel like we went back to something a bit more harsh, probably because the socioeconomic conditions have changed. There was a big crisis, and people see the future in a darker way. Of course, climate change become like a very present issue. So I think that also affected the graphics in the last decade. I feel like the graphics have been a little bit colder, a bit dystopian, a little bit sober, and like not so friendly. So yeah, I feel like the 2000s were like this era where like things were a bit happier, and then from 2010 till 2020 things have been a little bit more colder and harsh. That's my own subjective interpretation. So yeah, it's not an academic analysis.
Now, I'm not judging you, I'm just learning from you, because in Pakistan, what do you do actually with your design and with your style? In Pakistan, some of the people, they follow these style and this type of designing criteria. Mostly people think like doing social media marketing and designing brochures or something in marketing level. Mainly designing is used in Pakistan in marketing level. That's why I'm asking you, and you are sharing some of your experience and ideas, like globally, what the designing what how it's evolved and what are the designs people are making. That's what I'm learning from you. Yeah, it's pretty awesome that you shared some.
Right. Yeah. And I think things have changed so much in the last years. And when I started, we had like few points of reference because we had few websites that we trust, some magazines that we looked at, and there was very heavy centers of gravity for trends. I was like, okay, if it's popular, it's going to be announced in this blog and this website, and this magazine is going to talk about it. And you had magazines like Juxtapose or Beautiful Decay, and like people were kind of like looking at those as like references. At least for me, those were kind of like my norths. And these days, it's kind of like the compass is kind of like it's a fractal of like so many possibilities. So there's so many things that you're not able to cover that are like incredibly deep and very like sparking your imagination. Like it's crazy the stuff you see in social media. So it is kind of like it's harder to navigate these days because you are exposed to so much. So analyzing trends, I think it's a profession itself. Like I don't think it's, sometimes there's these reports at the end of the beginning of the year where they kind of like they shout of like, we think this is going to be trends that we kind of like see, and they're interesting to read. But I think in the end you cannot really, your heart needs to go where it wants to go, you know, because as a creative, I think it's a balance between, when you're a designer, between providing a service and being functional, but at the same time you need to let your emotional side, so it's a mix between something rational and something emotional, but this emotional part of yourself is based on intuition. And I think you need to kind of like let your head be a camera that registers what it likes and gets rid of what it doesn't, and just, you know, retain what you think it's speaking to you, and then you will filter it into whatever works. Because I don't believe so much in a work that is very calculating the probabilities. Like I'm gonna do it like this because this is on trend. This is something that I feel like it's maybe a short-term strategy, but I don't believe in the long term is gonna make you the best creative. I think sometimes you need to follow a little bit your own intuition and get lost into your own path and find something that is unique, you know.
Okay, how can anyone come up with his own style and his own intuition in the designing world?
Yeah, I think it's a process of getting lost, like with your own. There's a moment where you're creating, and it happened to. It's like when you're reading a book too. There's a moment there's deep reading, no? Like you're like, things are just going, flowing, and this state, it's the same when you're creating. I think there's a moment where you are able to forget about everything, and somehow your whatever you're creating is speaking to you too. There's a conversation between the artwork and you, and that is kind of like, this is when the good stuff happens, because this is where you find your own answers to what it needs to be done. But it's a process of just work. I don't think it comes from inspiration comes from the outside and then then I'm gonna do this idea that it just came to me. It's like no. Like I think the ideas come as you are working, and then things start to speak to you, and suddenly there's a method, some sort of like harmony that you have discovered in your own sort of methodology, and that's what it takes some time, but if you put work, it always happens.
So what do you say about experimenting with the designs, like doing a new thing each day and learn your own style? Is it good to experiment with your designs? What do you say?
Yeah, I think so. You mean like when you work for personal projects and you're not yeah, I think you always need to kind of like balance commissions, because commissions, you cannot just experiment with the client's time or money. Like you need to be effective. And but if you experiment on your own time and you put that out there on your social media, and then maybe a client sees it and it's like, I think that's the kind of like the style that I would like for my brand. And then after you have experimented with your own time, maybe a client comes in and it's like, okay, this is actually working very well. This visual language, it's good for my brand. Why don't you apply that? And that's how many times happen, at least for me, that I do something for fun because I want to create something that I'm just interested in without thinking about the possibilities. But then a client comes and is like, oh, okay, I think this is an interesting possibility for my brand. So now execute it. So it's always good that you combine commissions and personal work. Yes, indeed.
So in your journey of designing, what thing challenges you the most? Before that,
Yeah.
before that, can you please let me know what Like you are a illustrator, typographer, and I see some of your videos and your content. You are playing with VR.
Yeah.
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 You know what actually are your areas of expertise?
So I think till 2015, I was only working with two tools, Illustrator and Photoshop mainly. And those were my two main tools. But then after 2015, the market itself pushed me into, okay, you need to do things in 3D and things need to move. And there's a lot of like demands on that area. So I felt like I was kind of like losing a little bit my market by not using certain tools. So it was hard for me to do a switch, but then eventually I did it. And then from there, I've been just, you could say, working with many tools without going very deep on them, because 3D, it's almost a specialty in every, it's a specialty of many specialities, because you have modeling, you have material, you have light, you have animation. So I'm not very good at any of them, but I kind of like try to skim the surface of these areas in order to be able to direct maybe others, understand what it could be done if I need to hire somebody. And creativity at the end of the day is play. It needs to be fun, you know. It needs to be something that you enjoy doing. So when a new tool sometimes it's a good way to create a new game. So that's something that I enjoy doing. So for example, VR, it's very fun and easy to learn, and the possibilities are very interesting. So I really recommend to anybody. It makes a lot of sense that if you're designing in 3D, you're gonna put the points in space while you are moving your hands in a scene in space, rather than using a mouse and clicking on a 2D surface, because it's a 3D object. So with your hand, it's way easier to move around and create an object than with a mouse. Yeah.
So what do you do with the VR? Is more like motion graphics or motion control something?
More modeling. Is more for modeling, for creating an object. And then you can create an object, and then that geometry, you can bring it to a 3D software and then illuminate it and maybe make it move. Yeah.
That's really cool. So with my previous question, what challenges you the most in your designing?
Yeah, I think these days it's the most challenging thing is to be excited about something new, you know, like that you're like, after you work so many years, it's easy to get into a routine and things, you know, you could do something very well, but if you do it 1,000 times, it's going to be very boring. So it needs to be something new constantly. So the biggest challenge is to find something new that you're very excited about.
So how you find something new to do?
Yeah, sometimes it's a tool. Sometimes it's a matter of finding a new playground that you can just understand new rules and just dive into them, and in a way that you can find yourself in it. Because the problem with so many softwares these days, and this is what I like, I'm a little bit scared sometimes about tools that make our possibilities so big, because they are expanding so many possibilities, but at the same time they are erasing a little bit the human factor, because everybody can do the same and does the same, so everything looks very similar. This is a little bit with AI these days. I feel like when the machine does 99% of the job for you, it's very hard that you're going to be unique, because if this 1% that you put in it, how is that going to make a big difference? Like, you need to, I think, make at least, the machine needs to be 50-50, you know, like you need to put 50% of your element in it, and it needs to be differential. So your work still has a personality. The problem with automation is that everything kind of like becomes a little bit of a creative communism, and that's the part that I'm a little bit scared, and it's because maybe every time there's progress, there's a little bit of fear. I'm adjusting to this fear, and I'm sure like things will be adjusted, but I personally want tools that help creatives to find themselves, not tools that make all the work for creatives, because then everything is the same. Creativity becomes a very boring feedback. There's no challenge, and creativity needs to be a self-discovery process. You need to discover something about yourself while in the act of creating, and some tools are amazing because they really show you like, wow, your creative self could grow a lot with technology, because certain things you could not be doing with a pencil and paper. The possibilities are more limited and very dictated by your own skills. But with technology, your skills can really expand into very interesting ways. But it's a dance too, because the possibilities of the technology need to be created by you too. If the machine does everything for you, then we don't have a lot to say, and that's where it gets a little bit like lazy or scary.
Okay. So you said that you have been in the freelancing field for I guess 15 years.
Yeah.
So what do you say? Like mostly designers, they go for freelancing, but in terms of earning, obviously, so mostly they don't get their hands in, like actually hands in the freelancing field. What do you suggest? So what should a designer do? What should a designer do to become a freelancer, and how to sell this product and his designs more effectively?
Yeah, I think depends a lot in what kind of client you have and what kind of discipline you're working with. I feel like it's different when you're doing a brand job than an illustration job. I think the process is way more different. For example, the illustration, I think it's more forgiving because normally an illustration will not be living as long as a logo, for example. So the communication with a client for their logo, it's very important, and it can really, there's a very strong psychological part in this convincing the client and how you guys connect. And that is a process that I think it's hard to teach. I'm still learning about it, because it's something that I think it's about creating a connection, a human connection, and and going together in a very democratic process where everybody has a voice, and you're trying to translate that voice from the client and recommend what you think is best. But it's kind of like a very balanced conversation between two parts. Whereas, for example, an illustration, I think you are more in control of what needs to be said, and the client might need to accept more what is in your hands. But with a logo, I feel like maybe they have more control. But it's hard to say. Like I said, I'm still learning about it, and I think the best way to approach things is to be honest. I always share my process, and I'm very open about the problems that I encounter in the process. Like I might say like, oh, I tried this, but to me this is not as good as that, and I try to kind of like get the client inside the same process. Hey Peter, good to see you. Have a friend just come to the studio. It's haven't seen him in 2 years.
So you are in your office right now?
Yeah, this is my office. So this is Peter. Hey Peter, coming from Lima. Hi. And this is my studio, and that's Leo. This is the dog we have over here. We share it with a few creatives and a company here in Brooklyn.
Okay, so you're working with a company, huh?
No, it's not related to design. The company, it's they do like drinks. So they have a space here big enough. So after the pandemic, I had my studio before, but with the pandemic, it was kind of like everybody had to find a new space. And I was lucky enough that these friends of mine, they're building this company, and they said like, we have enough space, but did you come over? And I said, yeah, that's great. So yeah, that's why I'm here.
You're doing your designs and creating your stuff in this studio.
Could you repeat?
Hello?
Hello, can you repeat? I couldn't hear you.
I said that this is your design and you work. Really sorry, I forgot what I said. So,
okay, I think what you were saying is like if I work by myself or if I work with a team.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I work most of the time by myself. I have a producer, and she helps me out to organize calendars, projects, and establish a little bit the whole sort of like production side of things. But yeah, it's pretty much a one-man team that then reaches out to different people, animators, modelers, and can work a little bit as a director.
So I saw you in your portfolio, like in your client list, there were many like prestigious magazines and like singers and companies. Yeah, and you basically did that work by yourself or with the team or another person?
Yeah, most of the things that you see in the portfolio, I've done it myself. There's few times where I had to team up with a modeler or somebody that can do the job better than I. But if I can manage, that's something I'm trying to change actually, because what's happening right now is that the possibilities that I can reach to, they're very limited at some point, because today's technology allows you to do so much. So I'm trying to work more with teams now, where I'm able to put my intentions in a file and in a project, but then give the file to another person and then see how this could grow. So I'm very excited today. I'm working with an animation team that they are taking my illustrations and animating them, and that's where I think the future is for me. Like I can do images, but like everything needs to move these days. So I think I will be working more with teams from now on.
That's really good. So when you move from Barcelona to New York, so did you find any change in the designing world because of the environment?
Well, not really. I think more or less things stayed more or less the same, but I think after 2 years being in New York, I really felt the need of starting to work more with 3D. So I think this was not this. I think creativity these days is so global that it's not attached to any geography or anything like that. So those changes will have happened in Barcelona too. I just moved to New York because I wanted a change. But if I was from New York, I would probably have moved to Barcelona. So it was kind of like after, I don't know how do you see that, but I think after 10 years, it's good to do a change of something. I'm even considering doing a change now after 10 years in New York. So we'll see. So
you don't, in your opinion, if I'm not wrong, you say that environment doesn't include or it doesn't involve in the creativity, or does?
Well, it does. Like you are creating always, I think, based on the moment and how you are like affected by many things. And like if you get the same brief, exactly the same thing, maybe just like 1 month after, you would do something completely different, because in your head there are other things and you would just do different solutions and everything will be affected. So of course you're always affected by it, but At the same time, I don't believe that it's so important to be in a city like New York these days in order to do great work, because I feel like the internet has really changed that, and the creative pool these days of creatives of all around the world, it's very scattered. It's not like, oh, I'm gonna work with this guy from London because he's definitely better than others, and maybe they are in, I don't know, Brazil, for example. And these days, I think you could be the best in your specialty anywhere in the world.
Okay,
so that's my point.
Okay, according to my point, what I think is that changing environment or moving into something better, it helps you to become more creative and know your own style. It's just my opinion.
Mhm.
Yeah, because in Pakistan,
No, and you're right. I think you're right. I think it's important that you're stimulated about, like, that's why also I travel a lot and work. Like, if I can, I'll spend like more than 5 months outside of New York and work remotely, because you are more excited about certain things and you're sometimes more focused. Even just the time zone difference, I think, is great, because then somehow everybody's sleeping while you're working somewhere else, and then you get this amazing focus. And so breaking the routine is always very good, whatever that is. Maybe you decide to go not a different country but a different place, and that could also affect a lot how you create. So I think that's awesome.
Yeah, this is really that's a good idea that you pointed out. Like, mostly designer here, they get designer block. Like, when you say writer block, that it's more similar to designer block. You can't think of anything, and when you're designing, you don't come up with the new ideas, or what you are doing, you say, oh, it's boring, I can't do, I can't complete it. You stated the best point. Like, we should change our routine or give it break or not.
I think it's important that, like, all the time a creative needs to be stimulated. And I think it's not a mechanic work. Like, it's not a 9 to 5 work, creativity, because sometimes you could some days I'm in the studio many hours and there's nothing happening here, and it's very frustrating. It's like when you're a fisherman and you're going to fish and there's no fish, but you need to go every day, and some day you get a big one, someday you get a few ones, but you need to go every day. But there's certain conditions that I think provide for a better productive day. And I think being stimulated by conversations, movies, places, all that stuff, and it feeds your brain in a good way. And I think it's all about making connections in different things, and not avoid the tunnel vision. No, like, that's a little bit what we're trying to. I think creatives always try to break that thinking out of the box.
I'm not a consistent one. If I can state myself, I try to experiment with new designs. If I made something with one style, the next time I'm just trying to come up with new thing. But my instructor, like, I'm doing a course of graphic designing, and now I'm doing a job as well. So my instructor, he said, Tanzila, try to be consistent with your designs, like, repeat it. And I'm always saying that I can't repeat my designs. I think it just lacks my creativity here.
Right. I mean, I think it's one of those things. Like, I remember I asked something similar to a friend of mine that is a painter, and he has a very consistent style, and there's something good about people that have a very consistent style, because they create repetition of memories. People identify their work very fast, and they are kind of like, okay, I can see that you're making a memory stamp every time you create an artwork, and everybody kind of like remembers that. And I asked him, like, oh, maybe strategically I should, like, be more consistent and choose one style and just, like, be more but I get bored. If I do that, I get bored, and that's why I'm always changing. And his answer was very good. It was like, I mean, if you can, do it, but if you cannot, don't do it. And it's very simple, but I think everybody has a tendency, and you cannot really fight against it. So there's certain people that would be very good about going deep into one visual language and still discovering new steps every time they create, and they move very slowly within the same style. And some other people, which I'm including myself, it's kind of like shoots here, shoots there, and like they are constantly changing quite drastically the style, and it's just a natural way of creating, and you cannot force it. I think everybody works in a different way.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Good, I'm glad. And you guys are studying graphic design over there in Pakistan, or is it illustration? Like, in what year are you studying? You're a student, or you're like?
I was a student of graphic designing. Basically, I did my master's in computer science. Other than that, I felt like I'm not a researcher type of person. Then I said I'm a designer. Then I shifted my career into graphic designing because I love it. So I'm trying. I'm in a, you can say, in very initial stage of my designing career. So there is an institute in Pakistan where I'm currently sitting in my classroom because I did a 1-year diploma course. Then I had a job in the institute. Now I'm designing, and also I'm doing video editing, video editor, videography, all things, and that's the thing.
Good, very good. And do you see yourself same being in Pakistan, or you have possibility of like traveling and going somewhere else?
I personally don't want to be in Pakistan because lack of opportunities. You can say it's, don't judge me, because most of the people here, they start judging when people, they just say like, I try to move on to international level, okay, to go on another country and proceed my designing career. But people here, some of the people, they are like conservative. They don't like the idea. So I am more into go elsewhere where you can find better opportunities.
Yeah.
So don't ruin your creativity or ruin your chances to become a better person.
Right. Well, don't stop trying, because if you can, I think it's always good to try to expose yourself to other possibilities. But still, if not, internet has all the answers these days, I think, if you're able to navigate it in the right way.
Okay, can you suggest what type of approaches should I adopt, or what type of navigating? Like if I go to internet, okay, I change my search engine style, or change my keywords for searching. What are the keywords should be that can help me the most in to be more creative or to be a better designer?
Yeah, I think it's about, I guess, maybe try to plan a little bit where you want to go professionally and what sort of skills you want to learn. What I think is great about what internet really provides is like shares knowledge in a very altruistic way. So there's so much content over there that is about giving you skills for free. And so depending on what you want to learn, if you want to learn lettering, VR, 3D, there's so much out there that it will like give you all the tools you need in order to get there. So that's what I think. It would be it's a matter of time of how you kind of like plan yourself. But there's so many people that just design school teaches you how to think, but then how to make things, I think, is the internet, because you will always be a permanent student because I need to keep learning every day, new things all the time. They're changing so fast, and yeah, you constantly kind of like going to YouTube, learning this, that, and yeah, you all the time connected to technology in that sense. So I think going to Skillshare, Domestika, like all these platforms that they have courses. Yeah, exactly. I do them many times, and then sometimes it's by project. Like if I have a project that, oh, this will be good for this tool, and then you take a class in one day, and suddenly you're like, okay, if I apply this to the project immediately, you will remember how to use that tool. But I also got used to learning something and then forgetting about that till the next time I need to use it. And then I like to refresh my memory. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, this tool, this is how it's done. And like every project needs to kind of like go back to the library and pick up a new book and just like refresh your memory. Okay, this is how it was done. It's not here anymore. I need to go access it in the internet all the time because you cannot accumulate everything that is out there. So it's important that you know how to navigate the internet and just like find your source of information when you need it, no? Like instantly. But yeah, I think it's very exciting these days for what the possibilities are for technology and creativity. They're so big, they're kind of scary. Like it's so much.
So what do you say that we should try new tools, or we should try new design styles?
I think you're frozen.
No, I'm good. Can you hear
I think
Yeah.
I could hear you. I think what tools you should be trying. Yeah, I think
Yeah, you're saying.
I think probably it's hard to say, but I think graphic design has branched out towards like a lot of like 3D work that I think it's becoming more kind of like standardized. Adobe has really embodied this and created so many tools around 3D, and I think it's a good time to step in it because it hasn't been this simple ever. So now it's a good time to learn anything 3D related. I think is very interesting. Also, all the AI stuff. I don't particularly enjoy it that much right now. I think maybe in the future will be somewhere where there will be more control. I just don't like too much the automation results that feel like they're too similar. They're surprising, but I feel like I can only see a robot behind the artwork. So I'm not so excited about it, but I think it's going to be the future. So that's also something that it's important to put your eyes on. And yeah, and other than that, I think it's about following a little bit what your inner desire tells you, because that's what's gonna make you very unique when you're following a little bit whatever you as an artist or creative have been born with. Like you don't choose a little bit the things that you fall in love for, so you need to kind of like listen a little bit what's sticking inside of you and then just follow that.
So what can help me trying with playing with new tools, or having new designing styles, or experimenting new designing styles? What can help me the most? Both, or any of them particularly?
No, I think it's important that you start wherever you kind of like feel it's something that you would enjoy, and then from here start to just figure it out. I feel like pretty like it's a drift. Like in my own case, for example, I'm trying to do some typographical sculptures. So then I realized that, okay, I need to learn some modeling in order to do that well. And I've been kind of like trying in many different ways. Like sometimes it's with VR, I realize, oh, that's not the right method. So I think I need to learn this. And then you kind of like just get frustrated in the process, but at the same time making little achievements when you find the right answer. So it's about having that conversation with yourself a little bit and try to improve by finding your own path. And of course, when you are in school, that's what it's great about having teachers, because you don't need to make those decisions. But once you leave school, you need to make your own path based on what you want to learn. But what is important is like you keep learning, like just never stop being curious, and just keep enjoying that process of mistakes that at some point teaches you good lessons.
Okay, that was really awesome. And it was really nice talking to you, Alex. Thank you for giving your time to me. And
yes, of course. It's been a pleasure. And I hope that some of this was helpful, and wish you guys the very best.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Take care of
Have a good night. All right. You too. Bye-bye. Bye. Nice to meet you. Bye.
You too. Bye.